We actually just saw the Lian 207, which was a case that I said is probably going to be a focal point, and Phanteks might have an answer to it already, and that's going to be over here. So there's a $100 case. They have a $130 variant. The 207, I think that one was, top of my mind, is like 80 bucks or something like that. And the case that Phanteks is working on will ship with 4 pre-installed fans, 3 of which are right here. So actually pretty exciting because we just started out on case reviews again. And one of the biggest things we've been talking about is how there's endless $150, $200 cases now. A lot of 220 with stuff like the Height Y70. So we've really wanted some budget cases. They've got this really heavily molded and shaped front panel. The fans just seat like normally. It's 4 screws, nothing special there. But the molding is supposed to block recirculation of air. So the best example I have, or maybe the worst, depending on how you look at it, of recirculation is probably the Phoenix Enso, where it was basically sucking the air back out after it had been heated and recirculating it through the case. So it can be a thing. I don't know how much it's a thing on these types of cases. Maybe we'll do an A/B when we review it. But that's one of the more unique aspects of the G400A and N that I think Patrick and I will look forward to testing. Over here, this is a concept. It is not done yet. This is an Evolv X2. We'll spend some time talking about this today. First thing I pointed out was this kind of reminds me of the Founders Edition shroud design. And it's not complete yet, but there's a couple interesting things they're trying over here. And then if we jump over to the fan table, there is an updated interconnecting fan solution, an air cooler we're going to be talking about that's supposed to be competing in the $40-ish market. A lot of the pricing and release dates are TBD today. There's an AIO as well with a downdraft fan for VRM cooling, and they've got molded into it some channels to try and guide the air. We'd have to test it to see how it does, but this is something we've been talking about a lot with the Liquid Freezer 3. And then if we jump over to the other side of the room, so over here, 2 back connects supporting refreshes of NV5 and NV9. We didn't cover these cases originally beyond news coverage. They launched during our case review hiatus, but those are new. And then this is just a massive server or workstation solution chassis, and then water cooling open loop over here. So lots to talk about today at Phanteks. We're gonna start though with that budget case, budget-ish, as budget as it gets these days, because I think that's probably the most interesting. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly's Aeronaut and Hydronaut thermal pastes. Aeronaut is Thermal Grizzly's entry-level thermal solution, marketed as resistant to curing and for long-term endurance. Hydronaut is Thermal Grizzly's next step up, targeted for overclocking and higher performance applications. We've used Hydronaut on a lot of our systems internally over the years. You can learn more at the link in the description below. Okay, so we'll start with the G400A and G400N. There are 2 variations of the case. There's a $30 price difference. We'll hit the differences first between them. So primarily G400N, it'll have 2 tempered glass side panels. It comes with an additional cable comb cover over the cable management system on the back that's included on both. And then it also has a controller on the back. But otherwise, the tooling is shared between them, and it's largely new tooling with some shared bits and pieces from other products. So walking through the case, on the front, this is a magnetic front panel, and the biggest difference from the P400A, which was one of the kind of long-standing, $90 to $100-ish champions, the ARGB variant ages ago, the biggest difference is going to be the front panel style. Ultrafine mesh became the name, and it stuck. The difference now, though, is they're actually going kind of backwards in a sense to a dust filter on the front with a mesh panel, with the key difference being that now there's more of an air gap. So actually, if you look down here, this is where that panel, these feet will socket in, like that. And if you come over to the profile shot, there's still 20 millimeters, 25 millimeters or something of space at the largest gaps down towards the bottom in the middle. So spacing it out should, in theory, help with a couple things. The biggest one is that when you have a filter directly attached to or overlapping a mesh panel, like you see with a lot of the magnetic filters, typically this close, you end up with alignment of the nylon or the mesh material with the actual holes. And so it ends up blocking some of that performance. It can also create some noise issues too. Phanteks has a couple top-mounted fan options on the power supply shroud. The 207 was, to me, the most direct competitor because one of the things that case is doing, as you'll see in our coverage of it, go watch it if you haven't, is they've actually moved the power supply to the front of the case, and then they have the two top where would be a power supply shroud, but I mean they've moved it, so it's not really a PSU shroud anymore. They've sunken those lower, and then they're using ventilation on the sides of both the right and the left panels, the lower sides. The reasoning for doing that is to try and give some more direct access to air for the fans that sit down in a traditional power supply shroud location. So Phanteks is taking some parts of that concept. They have some key differences in that the power supply is in a more traditional location, but Phanteks has perforated this panel. We saw this on Antex cases the other days as well, also on the channel already. And that's important because if you don't perforate it and it's just glass, then you're relying purely on intake through the bottom of the chassis. Let's flip this. Oh, and there's a RGB strip over there too. So the back of the case, this feels fairly standard overall, with the exception being there's a kill management channel here. And then on the N variant, that's where this piece comes in and attaches separately, whereas the A does not have that. Comes with 4 fans, they're 140s. Okay, so now we come over to the Evolv X2. Phanteks is basically trying to take the concept of the dual chamber aquarium and shrink it to a more normal footprint. The current layout, there's fan mounts down here on top of the power supply shroud. The power supply itself, they've kind of sunken and shifted a little bit so that it pushes it a little bit more out of the way of, I guess in theory, some of the air intakes you have to pull through the bottom of the case. But if we bring the camera down low here, the case doesn't actually extend all the way down. This is a stand to give it some elevation. Our testing in the past, generally speaking, in a very broad sense, we've seen that you need about an inch minimum to really get decent performance through the bottom of the case. Any less than that, you start restricting it, you need a lot more pressure to overcome it and pull it through all those turns. But anyway, this is elevated. Currently, this is a plastic bottom. The other materials, they're using plastics in a couple of places. Aluminum here for the shroud is the intent. And then for pricing, I think explains maybe the materials choices where Phanteks is, we'll see, but shooting for a roughly $150-ish price point, and then probably around Q4. I think the most interesting part of the case is actually, if you want to swing around here, going to be the back, where you can see these punched out channels for cabling. And the comment I made was, it reminds me of an ant farm, I guess. So back connect motherboard support as well. And then otherwise, I mean, I don't really have a ton of comments because it's not finished enough yet. So you can leave your comments below for Phanteks on what you think. The price positioning is probably the main point that's of any interest, because $150 for a showcase PC. There's an air cooler. This is a simpler single tower, single fan solution right now. This is the ST4 DRGB. Phanteks is targeting $30 to $40. So this market I actually have fairly memorized. The Thermalright Peerless Assassin is still in the $30, $34 range. For the dual fan solution, that is the one to beat for everybody right now. Deep Cool has the AK400, is probably one of the most relevant competitors. ID Cooling has some unfathomably cheap stuff. But this one, the approach is a 4 heat pipe design, hence the ST4. It's a pretty standard direct contact cold plate. The fan is the most different aspect of it, where it's got this screw. So it actually twists into place and then screws. And what they're doing is they're using a piece of these interlocking fans, which we'll come back to these in a moment, where you can see this overhang here has that same screw point. So same type of fan, just basically making use of the screw to anchor it. On the bottom is we'll just kind of pop this out, a 3D printed currently, but it's going to change to something more permanent. Basically plastic spring down there. So the fan ends up sitting in this, and again, that's non-final at the moment, and then it twists into place, screws down, pretty straightforward. I gotta say, from the looks standpoint, I'm really not sure about the overhanging plastic on the edges. You don't want to so one option would be to pull this down further and try to encase it, but now you have new problems with just gonna be thermal. We've seen some companies do that where they'll fully encase the cooler in plastic. That's not the way to go. But having just the overhang, I don't have a constructive way to improve it, but I'm personally not a fan of the overhang on it. They've got some strips in here to illuminate. Pretty straightforward. The pricing is supposed to be $30 to $40, like I said, and launching probably late Q3, somewhere that actually everything on this table is late Q3, Q4 area. Let's do the liquid cooler really quickly. So this is the Glacier One M25 G2 360 AIO, and there's only a 360 variant at the moment planned. It's got that VRM fan I showed a moment ago. So this comes off. There's the fan, and currently that fan's mounted just like a GPU fan would be, with, it looks like maybe 3 screw points to the top of the chassis. This feels currently non-final, so some of that stuff may change. Cable pulls through down here at the bottom, and it's got a 3-pin at the moment. And then VRM cooling, it's all about how much they can angle the air into the actual VRM. Most motherboards these days are built extreme overkill, but there are still some really bad ones out there that can benefit from it. For the cooler itself, so it's supposed to be $30, launching at the same time frame as the air cooler we just looked at. And then otherwise, standard thickness radiator, standard thickness fans, 25 mil thick fans, and then that'll bring us to the fans themselves. So the point for these is to do a daisy chaining fan where it's still hiding the cables, but going a cheaper route, as in also cheaper for the end user. They're trying to sell a pack of 3 of these for $30. So it interlocks, you can push it down in there to kind of hide it. And that is a departure from the more expensive options on the market, which actually include Phanteks' own options like the D30s, where the D30s use a separate PCB that we've shown that bridges between these two, and then the fan chassis has pins and pads to connect everything, making it a lot more expensive, in addition to whatever other changes they may have made to the fan body itself. So the only real downside with this approach, ignoring whatever performance factors there may be, is the overhang at the end. The upside's the price, and then I just gotta say, probably also the patents, less of a concern. So that is a benefit too. And then I guess the question for the audience is maybe if you have ideas for what they can hook into that. I think this is one of those turn something like an overhanging screw hole into a feature, because you can mount something there and maybe do something with it. Or Phanteks pointed out, potentially use it in a case. So anyway, let's pull one of these apart just to demo it. So a screw would go in down there, we've removed it. And then this just pulls apart like that. And they interlock with some just plastic molded in clips basically to sock it together. So that's gonna be it for what we're talking about at Phanteks. They do have some more stuff. We'll include that in a hardware news update, along with some of our Cooler Master coverage that we have of their Master Hub solution. So there's open loop cooling, there's a very large case, that'll all be in hardware news. And otherwise, as always, thanks for watching, subscribe for more, and we'll see you all next time.